Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me here again on my new channel called the Mandrake Mechanism, the channel where we go over the giant Ponzi scheme slash scam that is our banking system, the place where we reveal the tools and mechanisms they're using to pull off this charade, such as fractional reserve banking, central reserve banking, and the US petrodollar's world reserve currency status. Now today on episode 2 of this channel, I want to start where we left off on episode 1, talking about the BRICS nations competing and challenging that very US dollar's world reserve currency status. Now, the reason I want to start there is because in the last 6 months, there's been a tremendous amount of things that have happened that have either propelled the BRICS in size or their ability to challenge that world's US dollar status, causing the demise of that king dollar. So if you like the sounds of that and you want to help me out, please like, share, subscribe, get this content out there, because I really do believe if people have an understanding of this material, they'll have an awesome idea of what's going on geopolitically and macroeconomically. But with that being said, and no further ado, let's jump right into it. So in this episode, we're going to do a brief recap of the term BRIC as a group and the origin of it. Then we're going to describe just a few key events that have happened from their origins up until the last 6 months. And that's where we're going to go over the last 6 months and really lay out the key things that have happened that have grown the BRICS in size and their ability to threaten that US dollar. And to start things off, I'm just going to take a small chunk of a statement that BRICS made in 2013 that really gives you a theme and a flavor of their goals and desires. And this is something to keep with you as we move forward with this video and just in something in general as you hear more about the BRICS around the world. So quote, "We aim at progressively developing BRICS into a full-fledged mechanism of coordination on a wide range of key issues. As the global economy is being reshaped, we are committed to exploring new models." So they're telling us right there that as things change, as the economy is being reshaped, they're going to come up with new models that really are in their best interests if we're not going to pay attention. So going back to James Rickards for another one of his great books called The Death of Money, which I highly recommend that you pick it up. You'll learn a tremendous amount from that book. So in that book, quote, "In 2001, Jim O'Neill and his colleagues at Goldman Sachs create the term BRIC to highlight the group's share of GDP and higher growth rates compared to established large economies such as the G7. And then just shortly after that, by 2008, the G7 was practically a museum piece, and the G20, including the BRICS and others, was the de facto board of directors of the international monetary system." So you can see just from the inception, it only took a few years before the G7 was replaced, and BRICS is now in this, and now they're having more of a say of what's going on. So now, just shortly after that, in the history of BRICS, in 2010, South Africa, and I do believe this is a correction. I think in my first video, I mentioned 2006 as South Africa, but that was just the beginning of them talking about joining the BRICS nations. But here we have in 2010, South Africa began efforts to join the BRIC grouping. They officially became a member nation on 24 December 2010 after being formally invited by China to join and subsequently accepted by other BRIC countries. So then going forward just a tiny amount of time again, the BRICS Forum, an independent international organization encouraging commercial, political, and cultural cooperation among the BRICS nations, was formed in 2011. In June 2012, the BRICS nations pledged $75 billion to boost the lending power of the International Monetary Fund. Now, I'm bringing this up again because this is really key, because they're trying to give money into the IMF to give them more leverage in discussions about world reserve status, the money system, anything really to do with economics. So this is really important. So now we're going to go back to James Rickards again, because he does a good job of laying out in his book the intentions and what's really going on with BRICS. And this is where I first discovered this stuff, was 2014 in this novel. So, quote, "The BRICS leaders have begun to stake out radical new positions on 5 key issues: international monetary fund voting, United Nations voting, multilateral assistance, development assistance, and global reserve composition." Now, I highlight this in red and underline it because this is the key point: global reserve composition. They want to be in the global reserve status. So their manifesto calls for nothing less than a rethinking or overturning of the post-Second World War arrangements made at Bretton Woods. Woods that led to the original forms of the IMF, World Bank, and the United Nations. The BRICS insist that unless those institutions are reformed to be more inclusive of BRICS priorities, the BRICS will take concrete steps to create their own institutions to perform their functions on a regional basis. So here's James. He's warning us this is what's going to happen if we don't be more inclusive with what their demands are and what their interests are. So now I'm going to go and expand on that small statement that I made in the beginning that gave that flavor and that theme of the BRICS nations. And this comes from March 2013 in Durban, South Africa. And this is at the end where they make a communique where they say, we directed our finance ministers to examine the feasibility and the viability of setting up a new development bank for mobilizing resources for infrastructure, and we are satisfied that the establishment of a new development bank is feasible and viable. We have agreed to establish a new development bank. We tasked our finance ministers and central bank governors to explore the construction of a financial safety net through the creation of a contingent reserve arrangement and amongst BRICS countries. We call for the reform of the international financial institutions to make them more representative and to reflect the growing weight of BRICS. We remain concerned with the slow pace of the reform of the IMF. So this is BRICS March 2013. They're telling you, please listen to us or we're going to do something ourselves. So just shortly after, a few months in September, Brazil announced plans in September 2013 to build a 20,000-mile fiber optic cable network from Brazil to Russia with links in South Africa, India, and China to be completed by 2015. This system is tantamount to BRICS Internet intended to be free of U.S. surveillance. So again, big moves physically that these guys are making to make themselves a stronger group that allows them to separate from the US dollar hegemony. So in closing with James Rickards from his book, The Death of Money, quote, the convergence has many facets, which can be condensed into a single theme, the diminution in the dollar's international role and a decline in the ability of the United States and its closest allies to reflect outcomes in major forums and in geopolitical disputes. The BRICS may have had a humble origin on an O'Neill's brief research paper, but the group has taken on a life of its own. And I might expand on that, saying they're turning into quite the monster. So this is really significant. Again, I highly recommend pick up James Rickards' books, The Death of Money. He even goes over different groups such as the BRICS and I believe the BELS, which is Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and the BRICS is Greece, Italy, Ireland, Portugal, and Spain. He goes into great detail of these different groups and these different organizations around the world that are reshaping the world, causing direct competition with the US dollar. Now, the other two groups I just mentioned, BRICS and BELS, they're not as big as BRICS, so that's why we're really going to focus on BRICS, and BRICS specifically is growing, and that's what we're going to talk to and get into right now going into the last 6 months. So let's jump right into that now. So talking about the events that have taken shape in the last half year, we're going to start around April, where Russia urges BRICS nations to create own SWIFT system. Now, if you don't know what SWIFT is an exchange where other countries go to get access to dollars, and they do so to either buy oil or say settle dollar-denominated debt. So the article kicks off with, the dollar reserve system is facing its greatest threat yet. Russian Finance Minister Anatoly Siluanov said on Saturday that the 5 BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, could mitigate the backlash of Western sanctions against Russia on their economies by pooling their efforts using a range of financial instruments at their disposal. So, quote, the current crisis is man-made and BRICS countries have all the instruments necessary to mitigate its consequences for the national and global economies. So going down a little further, Siluanov told a ministerial meeting with BRICS that the global economical situation had worsened substantially due to the sanctions, a statement from his ministry said on Friday. So, quote, This pushes us to need to speed up the work in the following areas: the use of national currencies for export-import operations, the integration of payment systems and cards, our own financial messaging system, and the creation of an independent BRICS rating agency. This is what I was saying. This is big. They're making their own system so that if anything really happens to the West, they can sidestep it and just kind of avoid that situation. So moving to the next article, and this is only a couple months ahead of the last point, in June of this year, BRICS developing new global reserve currency according to Putin. So it will be based on a currency basket of the five-nation bloc according to the Russian president. President Vladimir Putin said on Wednesday that the BRICS countries are currently working on setting up a new global reserve currency. The issue of creating an international reserve currency based on a basket of currencies of our countries is being worked out, he said at the BRICS Business Forum. According to the Russian president, the member states are also developing reliable alternative mechanisms for international payments. So RT told us in June of this year that this was happening. This is what they're doing. So the next article I'm going to go to is from Quoth the Raven, a great source. Check him out on Twitter. He does a lot of updates where you get a lot of really good information. So we're going to move down just a little bit, saying Russia is also taking other steps to strengthen the alliance between the BRICS nations, including rerouting trade to China and India. President Vladimir Putin said Wednesday that Russia is rerouting trade to reliable international partners such as Brazil, India, China, and South Africa as the West attempts to sever economic ties. We are actively engaged in reorientating our trade flows and foreign economic contacts towards reliable international partners, primarily the BRICS countries, Putin said in an opening video addressed to the participants of the virtual BRICS summit. So now we get into a little bit more details of that. So in fact, trade between Russia and the BRICS countries increased by 38% and reached 45 billion in the first 3 months of the year. Meanwhile, Russia crude sales to China have hit record numbers during the spring of this year, edging out Saudi Arabia as China's primary oil supplier. So together with the BRICS partners, we are developing reliable alternative mechanisms for the international settlements, Putin said. So if we're listening, they're telling us it's happening. It's happening. So going down just a little further here in the article, this is now President Xi Jinping. He echoed Putin's sentiments according to a June write-up by Bloomberg. So, quote, politicizing and instrumentalizing and weaponizing the world economy using a dominant position in the global financial system to wantonly impose sanctions would only hurt others as well as hurting oneself, leaving people around the world suffering. Those who obsess with a position of strength, expand their military alliance, and seek their own security at the expense of others will only fall into a security conundrum. So that is a big statement by President Xi right there. Going down, Quoth the Raven does a great job too. He pulls an article from 2020 where China and Russia ditched dollar and moved toward financial alliance. This is international relations. So in it, it goes on to describe de-dollarization has been a priority for Russia and China since 2014 when they began expanding economic cooperation following Moscow's estrangement from the West over its annexation of Crimea. Replacing the dollar in trade settlements became a necessity to sidestep U.S. sanctions against Russia. So ergo, it seems to me that the BRIC nations understand exactly how precarious of a financial situation the U.S. is in. Despite the dollar's recent strengthening, the nations have been in the midst of a multi-decade-long plan to de-dollarize. Even before the Ukraine conflict started, both China and Russia were stockpiling gold and working on denominating transactions outside of the U.S. dollar. It was another secret that was out there in the wide open. So great article by Quoth the Raven here. Definitely check it out if you have the time. moving to the next point here, and this is another big aspect of it with the growth in BRICS. So massive implications. Saudi Arabia in discussion to join BRICS coalition. The outcome would be global energy and economic cleaving. So I'm going to go down to the important part here. China's invitation to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to join the BRICS confirms that the kingdom has a major role in building the new world and became an important and essential player in global trade and economics. Mohammed Al-Hamad, president of the Saudi elite group in Riyadh, told Newsweek. Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 is moving forward at a confident and global pace in all fields and sectors. This accession, if Saudi joins it, will balance the world economic system, especially since the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is the largest exporter of oil in the world and it's in the G20. If it happens, this would support any economic movement and development in the world trade and economy and record remarkable progress in social and economic aspects, as Saudi Arabia should have partnerships with every country in the world. So this is where it gets into the really important part. That would essentially be the end of the petrodollar and, in even more consequential terms, the end of the United States' ability to use the weight of the international trade currency to manipulate foreign government. The global economic system would have an alternative. The fracturing of the world created by an outcome of energy development would be guaranteed. So just to give you a visual here, the Western Alliance, yellow, would be chasing climate change energy policy to power their economies, while the rest of the world, gray, would be using traditional and more efficient energy development. The global cleaving around the energy use would be complete. So here again, here's that visual. You can see Canada, United States, Europe, Australia, parts of Asia over here. They're in one side of it, and then the rest of the world, which is way bigger. And they're, as far as population goes, they're really pulling their weight as far as GDP grows. So this is a huge thing to pay attention to. So the next article, so not just Saudi Arabia, but preparing to apply for membership is Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt plan to join BRICS, and this is in July. So we're going to go down to here at this point. The expansion of BRICS could be imminent as Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt are in discussions to join the group of emerging market economies. All these countries, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt, have shown their interest in joining BRICS and are preparing to apply for membership. I believe this is a good step because the expansion is always looked upon favorably and will definitely bolster BRICS' global influence. So going down here a little more, in May, Chinese President Xi Jinping said BRICS members have to reject Cold War mentality and block confrontation and work together to build a global community of security for all. I hope all these countries will join BRICS quite shortly, as all the representatives of the core members are interested in expansion. So it will come very soon, Anand said. And sure enough, boom, just last week or so, South Africa confirmed Saudi Arabia will join BRICS alliance with China and Russia and move away from the US with explosive consequences. So down here, this weekend, South Africa leader confirmed the likelihood that Saudi Arabia will be joining the BRICS alliance. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa held a 2-day summit with Saudi Arabia on mostly economic matters. At the conclusion of the summit, he confirmed the intent of Saudi Arabia to join the BRICS economic coalition, which should not come as a surprise given the previous statements by Saudi leader and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Ramaphosa confirms Saudi Arabia wants to join the BRICS family. This was revealed by President Cyril Ramaphosa during his 2-day state visit to the kingdom on Sunday. The Crown Prince, Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman, did express Saudi Arabia's desire to be part of the BRICS, and they are not the only country, said Ramaphosa. He confirmed this on Sunday during the engagement with the media. So this is big. This is huge. Saudi Arabia is basically there. They are going to be a part of the BRICS coalition. So this is just going to be another huge blow to the US dollar. this is it. This is all the information I gathered. These are the key points I think we really, really need to pay attention to. So if that being said, if you like that information, please like, share, subscribe, help me get this out there. I think this is so important for people to understand because, again, geopolitically, macroeconomically, this is the driving factor. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining me here again, and I can't wait to see you next time.